Good morning. My name is Roger Morgan. I'm the founder of the Take Back America campaign. I've been engaged in drug prevention work at the local, state and federal level actually for the last 30 years. Started as the founder of the Coronado Safe Foundation about 1997. My real background is in business, foreign trade. I worked for Caterpillar for 10 years, mostly in Europe and the Middle East. And subsequently, I was a vice president of Volvo, in charge of Volvo Penta of America. I've been an entrepreneur in California for longer than I care to remember, but I think it's 40 years. And my motivation for being involved in drug prevention stems from the fact I have two stepchildren that got addicted to marijuana and meth 40 years ago at age 12 and 14. You see the devastation of two young people from these drugs. It's a compelling reason to try to see that it doesn't happen to other people. So before I go on, let me introduce my friends on the panel. We've got Cliff Kincaid, who is also has about 28 to 30 years involved in the same mission. I've got two good-looking girls here, Heidi Swan and Bryn Spejcher, both of whom have experienced detachment from reality owing to marijuana-induced psychosis. And they're going to share their stories with you. In Bryn's case, it led to a real tragedy, which she will explain. We've got two other speakers, Dave Evans, who is probably the best expert in America on legislative actions that can be taken to protect the victims or get compensation for the victims. And we've got Robert Charles, finally, who was Assistant Secretary of State for Colin Powell. He's worked in the White House for 3 administrations. He's a former naval intelligence officer. He's written a book on narcotics, and he's got too many credentials to repeat at this point. So let's talk about the issue here, which is really to change national drug policy. What has happened is a tragedy. We've got almost 1,000 people dying every day because of drug-related causes. We have an administration that, frankly, has been corrupted. The president, our commander-in-chief, has called for rescheduling or downplaying marijuana because, in his opinion, it's not as dangerous as other drugs. We've got 10 senators that have called for removing this altogether from the Controlled Substance Act. They know better. That's in defiance of all scientific information about the harms of this drug. The problem with the drug problem, the whole issue of is it more dangerous or less dangerous than other drugs, I would tell you, in my opinion, it's the most dangerous drug in America. And it's the foundation for all other drug use. So what's happened in the last 15 years is we've had a drug policy called harm reduction, which is frankly a joke. And in that period of time, there's been no effort by the federal government to prevent drug use or to enlighten the people about the harms of this drug. The market for marijuana has grown from about 14.7 million before Obama regime to current levels of 55 million. And what happened, that opened up a vast new market for the cartels to bring in other drugs, opioids, fentanyl, most famous at this point. And all of that contributes to the fact we have about 1,000 people dying every day. The next slide, please. When you compare that figure, 1,000 a day, and you look at all of the wars that we have had, going all the way back to the Civil War, there's nothing that compares to that figure. We lose more people because of an internal problem and a failed drug policy and an administration and high-level senators and others that are more motivated by factors other than their primary role, which is to protect the public. So you can see the screen better than I can, but in any event, we need to address this internal problem. You know, if any foreign country invaded this country and committed anywhere near this number of deaths, the Defense Department would be all over them immediately. So what's happened is we have a silent enemy in our ranks that has precipitated this problem. And his motives are, as we will see, his motives are primarily to destroy this country en route to his own obsession with creating a new world order. And right now he has tremendous influence on our administration. You can go to the next slide. So let's talk about harm reduction and what it really means. In all my experience in the business world, what I have observed is that most problems don't get solved because people don't understand the problem to begin with. And I just heard a report on the UN drug conference in Vienna that took place a couple months ago. And the whole discussion was on harm reduction, and it appeared nobody even understood what it really meant. It's a catchy phrase. When you break it down, what it means is, this was invented incidentally by George Soros quite a while ago, and what it really means is we should legalize possession and use of marijuana and other drugs. Secondly, instead of prevention, we go to treating those who are addicted or mentally ill. If they've overdosed, we have Narcan to try to bring them back. And the third and most preposterous part of this is that the theory is that the war on drugs has failed, and nobody questioned that. But what George Soros meant by that is that we are punishing people in inner cities and black communities, and now we have social equity programs. The reality is that these people were guilty of more crimes, and 80% of crimes are created by people whose minds are inundated with drugs. So for the last 20 years particularly, George Soros has spent untold millions of dollars to make sure that crime is not punished. And what we have today is insanity. He has spent up to $70 million getting district attorneys elected that won't prosecute crime. So it makes no sense at all. And that's what we're dealing with. And now the president has come out and said He wants to reschedule marijuana to a lesser category. 10 senators have come out and said, we want to remove it from the Controlled Substance Act altogether. This is not based on credible science. Okay, the science is clear going back 50 years about what this drug will do to people, all people. It's a fat-soluble drug that stays in the body and the brain for a month, compounding with additional use. So in extreme cases, it leads to other violent acts. So I'm going to ask Cliff Kincaid to come up and speak a little bit about George Soros and what his motives might be.
Thank you, Roger. I want to thank Roger Morgan for putting on this event in the heart of Washington, D.C. The nation, everybody needs to hear this message, but especially our policymakers, our members of Congress, because Roger has been on top of this issue, as he says, for 30 years or more. His book, Soros the Drug Lord, Pricing the Bubble of American Supremacy, is highly recommended. My group, America's Survival, usasurvival.org, has over the years published at least 5 different reports on the influence of George Soros, especially on the drug problem. In fact, at the same National Press Club back on October 27th, 2011, we held a news conference called the Soros Files, where we went into detail about his influence, his activities, who he was funding, and it's only gotten worse. It's only gotten worse since then. I was watching Fox News the other night, and they had a discussion between the host and the guest on what President Biden is going to do on this or that issue. And I thought to myself, President Biden is not in charge. And it's not only because he's feeble and decrepit, it's because his administration is owned and controlled by George Soros. He is the ultimate political donor in the American political system to the Democratic Party, and has been for years and years. He is calling the shots, as Roger Morgan points out. And the latest is to make it seem like marijuana is not as dangerous as people once thought, and that it ought to be rescheduled, reclassified as a less dangerous drug. When we looked at Soros over the years in terms of politics, his efforts really began when he tried to finance the ouster of President Bush, George W. Bush, and backed John Kerry for president. Then, to bring matters more up to date, he put a lot of money behind Barack Hussein Obama. Soros said in 2008, when Obama first ran, that Obama had the charisma and the vision to radically reorient America and the world. This is the so-called radical transformation that Obama himself talked about. And it's incredible when you think about it. I live in a nice area of Maryland outside of D.C. where we have a lot of friends who came from other countries. Our neighbors came from Africa. They're hardworking people. We have neighbors down the street who came from India, who are hardworking people, who want to succeed in this great country. And yet we have an immigrant by the name of George Soros, born in Hungary, emigrated to England, then came to the United States in 1956, who's made billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars in the United States. And what does he want to do with that money? He wants to destroy this country. He wants to destroy what enabled him to become a multi-billionaire. I noticed Roger had this quote about what it becomes, what happens when you become a naturalized American citizen. You have to take an oath saying, "I will support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same." Roger says, commenting, he should be incarcerated, George Soros, but at a minimum, his citizenship should be revoked. I agree. I might even go forward and say he ought to be deported. He's violated his oath. He's using his fortune to destroy lives, to create more suffering. And by the way, if people take the time to look, check out some of our reports as well. This is a man who came over here, and he didn't make his money by building up great industries, creating great products for the American people, creating millions of jobs for the American people. He is a financial manipulator. He's made so much of his money through a mysterious hedge fund based offshore with mysterious sources of cash from who knows who, but especially the super rich. And he bets against the currencies of nations. It's called short selling. He made $1 billion by betting against the British pound. He made another $1 billion by betting against the Japanese yen. This is how he makes his money, through the destruction of a nation's currency, creating untold human suffering for the people in these countries, now including the United States. Now I know Roger wants me to keep my remarks short, but I think you ought to look into the philosophy that's guiding this man, the philosophy of, quote, an open society, popularized by a philosopher called Karl Popper. Now, I was once a philosophy major. I studied this. Then I decided to get a marketable skill and became a journalist. But Karl Popper has this idea that Soros is trying to implement, an open society in which basically every immoral activity is tolerated and even promoted. This is how they achieve really what Marx envisioned and the Italian communist Gramsci foresaw as the erosion of society, undermining traditional values. That's the bottom line when you look at what Soros is up to. Now, we actually, at one of our conferences, had a businessman, an immigrant from Africa himself by the name of Zuby Diamond, who was very successful in America, but became very concerned, as Roger did, about George Soros. And he wrote a book, The Wizards of Wall Street, about Soros and what he called the scam that elected Barack Hussein Obama in 2008. And that was the housing collapse of that time period. That's what enabled Obama to win the presidency. Again, these people, Soros and these hedge funds, make money by betting on financial collapse, destroying the integrity of countries, their currencies, individual companies, calamities, catastrophes. This is how they make their money, and they're proud of it. The biggest recipient of Soros money over the years, as we documented going through his filings from the Open Society Foundations, which is his main vehicle, has been the ACLU, which, if you analyze their positions, they believe in the legalization of all drugs. Legalization of all drugs. Now let me conclude with a few comments about where we can go and what is going on in our opinion. It's more than just destroying a country. They are doing that. But it's for a specific purpose. As I indicated, they're using drugs as a weapon. In fact, many of our conferences over the years concerned the activities of the Weather Underground, a major communist terrorist group in the United States that, incidentally, their leaders, Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dohrn, had backed Barack Hussein Obama for the presidency in 2008. They later escaped justice, excuse me, and became professors in our universities. And you wonder why we have these problems on the campuses. But when she was in the communist terrorist group, participating in bombings of police stations, and even the United States Capitol, not too far from here, was bombed by the Weather Underground in 1983. Bernardine Dohrn issued a declaration of war against America. She said, "We fight in many ways. Dope is one of our weapons." Dope is one of our weapons. Bernardine Dohrn went on to praise the drug-crazed Charles Manson killers. And finally, a personal note. My own mother died from lung cancer after smoking for many, many years. It's a tragedy to have your mom tell you at one point, or the doctor, that she had lung cancer and only had 6 months or so to live. My father had smoked for years, gave up the habit. Yet ironically, marijuana, with some of the same carcinogens, some of the same addictive properties, is now given a seal of approval because, in my view, it has become a, quote, high, acceptable to the liberal elites like Soros who want to use the drug to condition young people in this brain damage fog and channel their energies into, quote, progressive causes. And this is why I think Biden, or whoever's controlling him, the Soros operation, is now trying to reschedule marijuana. It's votes. They're trying to, incredibly as it sounds, they're trying to appeal to young people, vote for me because I'll make this drug more easily accessible. And plus, we're going to make a lot more money at it because we're going to open up these marijuana businesses to federal banking, and that'll generate more tax revenue for liberal governments and campaign donations for the Democratic Party. We must stop it. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Cliff. I want to speak briefly about marijuana itself. I'm familiar with research that was done in the 70s and the 80s. The gal named Peggy Mann, unfortunately deceased, but she actually got a congressional award for her work discovering all the problems with marijuana in a day when the THC content was only 1.5 to 2%. Parents couldn't figure out why their star athlete was suddenly a couch potato. They were scholars that suddenly were failing school. And the journey began. And what the research showed in those days was that marijuana, number one, it's different than alcohol, which is a water-soluble drug that is out of the system in a matter of hours. With marijuana, it stays in the body and the brain for a month, compounding with additional use. And what they discovered was it changes the brain. It actually reduces the amount of white matter by as much as 80%. And it becomes a major problem even then for creating schizophrenia. Children born with marijuana in their systems because their mother or actually either parent smoking marijuana prior to conception can cause problems for a fetus. And what they discovered was babies were born with smaller head size. They were born prematurely. They were smaller. Stillbirths increased from 12% normal to 44%. And the physical and mental abnormalities were very prevalent, and that was in the 70s and the 80s. And fortunately, for all those that think the war on drug failed, it didn't fail when President Reagan was in office by having a parent program with a lot of old-timers like Bob DuPont and a few other friends of mine that have been in this game for 40 years. They reduced drug use by 64% just with an educational program. Keep in mind, we haven't had any education now for the last 15 years. And so when the media says that 70% of Americans feel marijuana should be legalized, they're speaking from ignorance. And if they know all about it, I mean, we went from 68% saying it shouldn't be to 70% saying it should be because the media is controlled by George Soros. You want to try the next slide, please? So what happened in the old days? And I would add that Joe Biden was a senator starting in 1972. He had access to all of that, and probably forgot old age has a tendency to do that. I can speak from experience. But so what happens today with high potency marijuana? I mean, we've gone from 1.5 to 2% in those days to often a range of 20 to 25% in smoke form and as high as 99% in condensates and oils and waxes used in dabbing, vaping, and edibles. And the harms are just a lot worse. And they've also discovered a lot more about marijuana. Like I have a great research scientist in Western Australia that has discovered that marijuana causes chromosomal abnormalities that result in physical and mental problems for a fetus, and not just the fetus, but all in the upline of kids and grandkids that they're going to have in the future. They've discovered in Canada, one of the issues, I don't remember the scientific term, but a baby is born with the stomach wide open and the intestines hanging out. There's another thing they discovered way back there with babies were born without a scalp, call it anencephaly. And of course the number that survived that is almost nil. So the other problem we have today is because marijuana stays in the brain for extended periods of time, compounding, and now we have probably 35, 40 million people that use it continuously. And so these people have brain impairment. And when it comes to driving, they tend to fixate on an object and drive to it. We've had little girls trick-or-treating in Vancouver that were killed on the sidewalk. We've got numerous cases in California where our highway patrolmen are sitting on the side of the road and they got killed. People in a bus stop got hit. Toll booth on the Bay Bridge got annihilated and the operator killed. So we've got 20% of the people in California now are using marijuana. I think nationally it's more like 17 or 18%. But essentially 1 out of 5 or 6 drivers is impaired. So it's not good for anybody, but in extreme cases, I've got to have Heidi and Bryn tell you what happens when psychosis hits and you detach from reality, and both of them have had that experience. So who wants to come first? Okay, Heidi Swan from California.
Good morning. My name is Heidi Anderson Swan. I'm an independent contractor with Every Brain Matters, a nonprofit organization. But today I'm speaking as an individual, as an American who is very concerned about the misinformation out there about THC. THC is the psychoactive ingredient in marijuana. The silence about the harms is one of the reasons that I wanted to attend the Bryn Spejcher trial. Have you heard that THC increases the risk for anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, psychosis, schizophrenia? If you haven't heard this, why haven't you heard this? Bryn Spejcher was convicted of involuntary manslaughter in the killing of her friend, Chad O'Melia. It was determined by both the defense and the prosecution that she was in acute cannabis-induced psychosis. The evidence that I saw in the courtroom was horrific and agonizing. It was testified that this was one of the grisliest crime scenes ever seen in Ventura County. Chad O'Melia died from stab wounds to the chest and the abdomen. He suffered over 100 cut wounds. Bryn Spejcher was in such deep hallucinations that she stabbed her own service dog, and she was plunging the knife into her own throat when the peace officers broke in, and they were wearing body-worn cameras. The camera footage showed that they had to beat her with a baton, they had to tase her to get the knife out of her hands. And it also showed that she was completely unaware of their presence, and she was responding only to the voices in her own head. The prosecutor said that Bryn Spejcher would have died by suicide without the intervention of the officers. One of my tasks at Every Brain Matters is to help Bryn Spejcher fulfill her probation hours. And Bryn Spejcher will tell you that if she knew that THC could cause hallucinations, cause a person to act on their hallucinations, cause them to become violent, she would never have tried it. So this tragedy was 100% preventable. And this is something that is very personal to me, because I have been trying to reach people like Bryn Spejcher, like Chad O'Melia, since 2017, just months before this tragedy occurred. You see, I wrote the first historical fictional story illustrating that marijuana, THC, can cause mental health problems. It's called A Night in Jail. Using A Night in Jail as a platform, I have been going around to public officials, to public health organizations, mental health organizations, trying to get them to educate that THC can do this. And I can tell you firsthand that overall, most of the time, the harms about THC are being withheld, intentionally withheld from the public. The most egregious example that I can think of is the California legislature. I volunteered for 2 bills with them to put common sense protections on THC products. The first was to put mental health warnings on products, similar to like what we have on tobacco products. And then the other was to put some protections around THC candies so that toddlers wouldn't mistake these highly psychoactive products as something that they would get from a snack bag. Both bills failed. They failed due to pressure from the industry. So we have no protections in California at all. And in fact, the expert at the Bryn Spejcher trial testified that California rolled out legalization without any regard for public health. So you can see that this is pretty much a catch-22 situation. There are no warnings about the mental health side effects, but defendants, like Bryn Spejcher, are told by the courts that they should have known. They should have known that THC could cause her to become psychotic and violent. So if we are going to prosecute people for the crimes that they commit, the violence that happens while they're in cannabis-induced psychosis, then we darn well better be sure that we have a decent public health education about it. We educate people about the harms of alcohol, the harms of tobacco. Can you imagine having Lung Cancer Awareness Month and not mentioning the dangers of cigarette use? Well, that is exactly what's happening today with THC marijuana. The month of May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And in the worst addiction and mental health crisis in our country, who is telling you that the drug most linked to mental illness is THC? To help right this wrong, I suggest that we set aside one day in the month of May, Mental Health Awareness Month, and make it THC Mental Illness Side Effects Day to help educate the public. Because if our leadership continues to stay silent about the mental health harms of THC, then who do the young people hear from? All they hear is from the cannabis industry, which is providing a lot of misinformation, not dissimilar to big tobacco of 50 years ago. To protect our country from more violence, from more death, like what happened in the Bryn Spejcher trial, we must educate the public about the mental health harms of THC.
Great job.
Thank you, Roger.
Bryn, come on up. This young lady is superb. Her experience is not isolated. What's different is God has given Bryn the ability to speak about it and not go to prison like so many others had. But come on up, Bryn. You tell them your story.
Thank you, Roger. Good morning, everyone. My name is Bryn Spejcher. and I want to express my gratitude for the opportunity to speak to you today. This marks my first press conference following my criminal trial. Before I delve into the details, I want to make it clear that I come before you as a nonpartisan individual. My sole purpose today is to shed light on a matter of public health, sharing my personal journey, and highlighting the devastating consequences of high-potency marijuana. Growing up in a suburban Illinois, I experienced a childhood filled with love and stability in a Christian household, alongside my parents, brothers, and a lot of pets. I engaged in various activities such as dance, Girl Scouts, art, sports, music, church, and much more. Adding a challenge, I was diagnosed with bilateral severe sensorineural hearing loss by the age of 3 and have utilized binaural hearing aids since the age of 4. Being the only child with hearing loss in our public school system led me to work hard just to listen and hear, to catch up in sound recognition, speech, and language development for the 4 years I lost. Following my academic pursuits, culminating in a doctorate of audiology from Washington University in St. Louis School of Medicine, I embarked on a career path aimed at helping others with hearing impairments. In 2017, I began working as a senior audiologist in Thousand Oaks, California, with UCLA Health, eager to make a difference in the lives of patients. The unspeakable tragedy struck on Sunday of Memorial Day weekend in 2018 in California, resulting in the death of my friend Chad O'Melia due to a severe cannabis-induced psychosis that I experienced after consuming unknowingly a potent dose of marijuana. This event plunged me into a period of profound grief, depression, fear, and introspection as I awaited trial. The subsequent legal proceedings led to my conviction of involuntary manslaughter, accompanied by 3 years probation, restitution, a mandate of 52 domestic violence classes, and to contribute 100 hours of community service to raise awareness and educate about the dangers of marijuana. I also want to express that I wouldn't be here sharing my story today without the Ventura County, California police. Their intervention literally saved my life. My aim is to dedicate thousands of hours, possibly for the remainder of my life, driven by the profound understanding of how a seemingly ordinary evening with a friend resulted in a tragic loss and life-threatening, enduring wounds. This harrowing experience, stemming from unregulated, falsely perceived, harmless cannabis, has underscored the urgent need for government regulation, awareness, and education. The years since that life-altering night has been one of immense pain and regret. Expert professionals from the prosecution and defense at my trial confirmed and agreed that the incident stemmed from a severe cannabis-induced psychosis, a condition exacerbated by the high potency of THC in the substance that was given to me without my knowledge. I want to emphasize that I had no prior history of mental health issues or violent behavior. Like many others, I was unaware of the potential risks associated with high-potency THC. I am no one special, and this can happen to anyone. The normalization of potent strains of marijuana has perpetuated the misconception that cannabis is inherently harmless. However, this story serves as a stark reminder of the dangers lurking within. The technique of milking or layering a bong, which I unknowingly was pressured into, can significantly amplify the effects of THC, leading to catastrophic psychological reactions in naive, susceptible individuals. I wish this on no one. My hope is that sharing this story, I can prevent others from experiencing similar tragedies. Every day, for the past 6 years, my heart aches for Chad, his family and loved ones, as well as my own. Both families have been irreversibly impacted by this horrifying incident. Not a day goes by that I do not grapple with the pain and sorrow caused by that unimaginable night. If I had known more about the potential dangers and deadly effects of high-potency marijuana, this tragedy would not have occurred. I am deeply concerned about the cases of other people who have lost their lives and have been severely impacted and having no idea that cannabis could have played a role. It's a sobering reminder of the urgent need for awareness and education surrounding the risks associated with high-potency THC. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my story.
Bryn, thank you for your courage to speak after such a traumatic experience. I want to point out that hers is not an isolated incident. You know, I could give you a lot of examples, but one in the brochure is about Adam Keel in Edmonton who had a similar experience. He ended up killing his father and then decapitating him and throwing his head in the water. Got 5 years in prison. Another guy in Edmonton, 31 years old, smoked pot with his sister, went crazy, ended up killing his mother. There's numerous cases, and nobody knows. There's been no education for the last 15 years. The truth has been suppressed, actually, because of George Soros and harm reduction. And the other thing, living in California, I can tell you it's no longer safe. We have daily homicides, hit and run accidents, traffic accidents are up. And because of Soros' influence on eliminating laws or reducing penalties for laws, you get the same penalty as a misdemeanor in California for 6 pots versus 6,000 pots. Okay? So could I have that next slide? Let's go to the next one if we could. Yeah. The other thing that's happened, which is tragic, we have 2 counties that I'm very familiar with in California, Shasta and Siskiyou. They're at the northern border next to Oregon. Siskiyou County has 6,000 to 9,000 illegal marijuana grows. That whole area up there historically has had 50,000 illegal grows. And we've had an invasion of Chinese and Hmong and Mexican cartels. And we have, in Siskiyou County, we have 1 sheriff and 2 deputies to take care of all of that. So they operate with impunity. Now they're trying to take over the whole area, elect their own people on the county council. They're sucking up all of the water in any source they can get. And I want to play this short video.
You have to understand our frustration that we have been going through this for years. So when a stray bullet comes and hits one of my children or me, I swear to God, on a stack of Bibles, I will go out and I will.
Is there an estimate of how many cartel members are growing in this country right now?
Conservative estimate, 10,000.
10,000?
Yeah,
people.
I'd say conservative estimate. That in the state of California, there's been clandestine marijuana gardens, basically cartel grows, on public lands.
Their illegal grow operation is a $49 billion black market.
A state fish and game warden who was shot during a raid on a pot farm is now telling his story for the very first time.
We're no longer doing standard patrol, doing the traditional game warden work. We are strictly working under the special operations umbrella within the agency.
People look at this runoff here from this grow is poisoning the steelhead here. I didn't know how bad it was until I read your books, and I knew it was bad, but I know it was as bad.
The battle against those perpetrating these crimes is about poisoning streams with chemicals and pesticides so dangerous it's killing animals, fish, and other aquatic species for miles downstream.
Organized crime groups, highly structured, well-funded, very aggressive, well-armed, in our forests all over California.
Sneaking up on these grows and camps during raids is conducted on foot, via patrol boats, and even by fast rope insertion from helicopters.
Don't move! Stay down!
On the run. He or Corey, stay with him.
Good girl! Good girl! Go, 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 go!
Unfortunately, the invasion didn't stop in California. Now we got major illegal grows in Oklahoma, New Mexico, and as Robert Charles will tell you when he comes on, even in Maine, they have 300 illegal grows. So if you could see the conditions and the poisons they use, they showed carbofuran in one of these pictures. It takes 1/3 of a teaspoon to kill a 300-pound bear in a matter of seconds. And then when they leave everything behind, so all of it seeps into the soil and into the water table. And then they sell their products laden with toxins all over the United States. And if you combine the problems of THC with the problems of the toxins, it's really an assault on humanity. And there's no federal involvement in, it's illegal to sell marijuana across state lines, but there has been no intervention by the federal government or until recently the state government. And that intervention is minuscule compared to this problem. So it's tragic, and I want to bring on David Evans at this point. Who have I got? Robert Charles. David. Let's start with David Evans. He's the best attorney in the United States on litigation issues dealing with marijuana. David, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Roger. I was very touched by Bryn's story. I get calls from parents and victims of marijuana on a weekly basis, talking about all the tragedies that have occurred in their lives because of the use of high potency marijuana. The biggest problem that we have in dealing with marijuana is the public perception that it is harmless. And there's a lot of great recent science on the harms of marijuana use. If you'd like a free booklet that looks into 36 aspects of this, you can go to aalm.info and download a booklet called The Risks of Marijuana Use. Again, that's aalm.info. I have decided to, I'm a litigator, I've decided to pursue litigation because of the utter failure of both the federal and state governments to deal with this issue. This is very similar to what happened with tobacco, very similar to what happened with opiates. The government just did not do its job. The crime that's being committed now is the rescheduling of marijuana. This is purely a political decision on the part of the administration. It is not backed up by science. They've actually falsely changed and come up with new criteria for deciding whether something should be a medicine or not. And this is going to be decided ultimately by the U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland. By the way, it's the official position of Merrick Garland, as he has submitted in some recent briefs in federal court, that Marijuana users demonstrate numerous cognitive defects. It is comparable, it contributes to cognitive impairment and executive functioning. Marijuana users are more likely to make risky judgments. Marijuana users with firearms, this is a quote from their brief, pose a danger comparable to, if not greater than, other groups that have historically been disarmed. For example, people who are mentally ill. Marijuana users are more likely to have difficulty exercising self-control, making it dangerous to them to possess deadly firearms. So that's the official position of the U.S. Attorney General, who is now seeking to reduce the public perception of the harms of marijuana. Now, how are they trying to do this? Well, a person who goes by the name of Admiral Rachel Levine is the political appointee in the administration who is spearheading this effort. They have decided that marijuana should be rescheduled from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3, putting it at the level of, say, a prescription for testosterone or Tylenol with codeine. They're doing this on the basis of whether or not licensed healthcare providers have widespread current experience with medical use of the drug. Now, that doesn't say widespread acceptance of medical use of the drug, just that they have had some experience with it. And that has to be in accordance with implemented state-authorized programs where medical use is recognized. Now, these state programs have all been implemented by legislation that has been promoted by the marijuana industry. This is very similar to years ago where a drug was approved on the state level called Laetrile for cancer treatment. Turned out to have no acceptable means for that, but they were able to convince state legislatures to go along with it. And a lot of money has been put into this on the marijuana industry. They're trying to trying to legalize marijuana in Florida right now. And one donor on the side of marijuana legalization has put in $39 million. So this is not about public health. This is about money. As far as the administration is concerned, trying to reschedule marijuana is about politics. President Biden, when he got elected, promised that he would look into rescheduling of marijuana. So now they've come out with a proposed rulemaking. They have shortened the usual time for public comment. It should be 90 days. They've made it 60 days. So obviously they want to get this done before the election to help the administration get elected. So they're looking at whether or not states have approved it and whether or not there is some credible support for at least one of the medical uses. Now, what is the standard that they are now abandoning, which has served us for many years and which has not allowed the rescheduling of marijuana out of a Schedule 1 down to a Schedule 3? Well, the standard that they're trying to get rid of is looking at whether the actual or relative potential for abuse. They're not looking at that anymore. The scientific evidence of pharmacological effect, if known, they're not looking at that anymore. The state of current scientific knowledge regarding the drug or other substances, well, they've narrowed that down to just, maybe if there were some studies saying that it was useful, rather than looking at the general scientific knowledge. They've now abandoned looking at the history and current pattern of abuse. They've completely abandoned the idea of looking at abuse of the drug as our criteria for deciding its schedule. What are the risks to public health? They've now abandoned that. They're not looking at all at the risks to public health. Looking at its psychic or psychological dependence, liability. They've abandoned that also now. Now, marijuana, especially high-potency marijuana, is addictive. Who says so? The American Psychiatric Association. They have cannabis addiction as a recognized diagnostic disorder. So is the World Health Organization on the International Classification of Disease. These are the organizations that decide whether or not something is addictive, not Admiral Levine of HHS. They also have now abandoned whether the substance is an immediate precursor of substances already controlled under the subchapter. In other words, if marijuana use would lead to cocaine use or opiate use, we're not looking at that anymore. But yet there's very clear science that it does lead to further abuse. They're also abandoning a 5-part test that has been used in the past by the DEA for making these decisions. That 5-part test was based on current Food and Drug Administration standards for acceptance of drugs for medicinal use. They're now abandoning that. Matter of fact, they're now abandoning the FDA. They used to say that one of the things we looked at is whether or not the Food and Drug Administration found it as acceptable use as medicine. They're not including that anymore. That's out the window. We don't want to look at that because the reason we don't want to look at that is because the FDA has looked at it and said it doesn't have any acceptable medical use. Now, there are certain cannabinoids within marijuana that may have use, CBD, that has made it through, at least for one drug, or synthetic THC. But again, those uses are very, very narrow. So what they have decided to do is also abandon, and this is a direct quote from the opinion of the Office of Legal Services of the Attorney General. And this is a direct quote. Although noting that no professional medical organization currently recommends use of marijuana and that one recommends against its use, HHS, Admiral Levine, who is a political appointee, has concluded that there is some credible scientific support that marijuana could be used, and we're not even considering the American Medical Association, the American Glaucoma Association, the Multiple Sclerosis Association. We're not going to consider any of them, including the American Heart Association, which just came out with information that using marijuana increases your risk of cardiac disease by 25%. So we don't want to look at that anymore. Okay, we only want to look at these political things. If a state has politically decided, the legislature has decided that that this is a medicine based on a political and not a medical decision, then it's going to be okay. Now, when I ask people, if you were going to get a medicine for your child that was approved by the FDA or approved by your state legislature, which one would you pick? Okay, certainly people would pick the FDA-approved drug because they recognize all of the political things that go into state legislatures, campaign donations, and so forth that have made this possible on the state level. Now, this is what's going to happen. The Department of Justice, based on politics, is going to say that marijuana could be used as a medicine. They're coming out with this rule. I know that there are people within the FDA who are not political. These are career people that have dedicated their life to public health who disagree with this. I know for a fact that people in the DEA disagree with this also. And I know for a fact that people within HHS also disagree with this, but they're being overruled by the political appointees. So they're going to come out with this, and then there's going to be litigation in the federal district court. I can't wait. I hope that I am one of the litigators that is responsible for this litigation. I cannot wait to get Admiral Levine in a deposition and go through all of the problems that marijuana causes and why in God's name are they saying it's okay. I'm just going to end with this. These are things that I've already submitted to the DEA, FDA, and Admiral Levine by personal letter. Today's marijuana is very high in potency. Marijuana edibles routinely are 85 to 95% THC. Now, when I smoked pot back in the 60s in college, marijuana was maybe 1, 2, 3% THC, and I got plenty stoned on it. I can't imagine what it's like to have something on 85, 95% THC. Marijuana is addictive. There's no question about that. It's more addictive than alcohol. There's plenty of good science on that. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association says so. So does the World Health Organization classification of mental and behavioral disorders. And they are acting contrary to that. There is no doubt anymore that high potency marijuana causes violence, particularly domestic violence and aggressive behavior. A lot of these people that have been involved in mass shootings have been users of marijuana. Now, who else says that? The Secret Service says that. They actually did a study on this and said that marijuana and alcohol are involved in a lot of these mass killings. The U.S. Surgeon General, before this administration, came out and said there's no such thing as medical marijuana. The U.S. Justice Department, who's now pushing marijuana, actually published a study showing that teen marijuana use worsens depression among teenagers. If you look at teenage suicide in Colorado, the number one drug found in the bodies of kids between the ages of 15 and 19 who commit suicide is marijuana. And yet the state attorney general in Colorado did a report on suicide and left that out. And this is typical of what's happening. The information about marijuana runs into a lot of lobbying from the marijuana industry. The Center for Disease Control has done a number of published papers about the dangers of marijuana. This is now being ignored by Admiral Levine. The National Institute on Drug Abuse has put out a lot of publications about the dangers of marijuana, all of which we're going to use in this litigation. And I'm going to ask Admiral Levine, why are you ignoring what your own agency talked about marijuana and published studies about it? The state laws that legalize marijuana are full of procedural and medical flaws and should not be used as credible evidence that marijuana is medicine. First of all, they advocate for marijuana to be used as medicine for certain illnesses where it has been proven that marijuana is harmful for those people. For example, glaucoma. Smoking marijuana to reduce intraocular eye pressure for glaucoma can actually cause blindness. So says the American Glaucoma Association. It can worsen depression. It can make anxiety worse. It can cause heart disease. The other big thing that they're completely ignoring is how marijuana interacts with prescription drugs. For example, if you're on blood thinners, marijuana use can cause you to bleed. The Veterans Administration has now recognized this, and anybody that's coming into the VA for surgery is told to stop using marijuana because it can cause unnecessary bleeding. So approving marijuana as a medicine without all of this information about interacting with other drugs can actually cause people to die. CBD, which has been put forward as a miracle drug and can help you sleep and for all kinds of problems, actually is harmful to your liver. If you're taking CBD, you have to have your liver enzymes monitored by a physician. And yet CBD is being sold like candy right now, all with permission of this administration. They're not doing anything about it. The FDA has come out against it. The FDA has come out with numerous examples of medical fraud for CBD, and the administration is doing nothing about it. And that's all on FDA websites. The states that have legalized marijuana are doing an extremely poor job of regulating it. One state, for example, only 3% of the marijuana stores have ever even been inspected by the state. In New York, which just legalized marijuana and has legalized it for medical marijuana, The marijuana industry itself came out with a report that marijuana as being sold in New York is dangerous to public health. Admiral Ravine is ignoring that. She was given this information by me prior to them coming out with this latest proposal. Marijuana has extremely high levels of contamination. Every state that has legalized it, that is doing any kind of a job on monitoring it, has come out with multiple product recalls. Millions of these examples of these products have been recalled on the state level because marijuana growing is susceptible to contamination, taking up heavy metals from the soil, and there's now starting to be litigation on that. Veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder. They have been pushing this also for veterans. Why? Because they think it helps them politically. But yet the Veterans Administration has come out against it, saying that it actually harms veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder, it interferes with their treatment, and it may cause some of them to become violent. Admiral Ravine is ignoring that also because I've given her that information. Also, people with HIV, marijuana hurts the ability of the body's immune system to function. And it can hurt people that have any kind of infection, including HIV. Who says that? Harvard Medical School, okay? Which Admiral Ravine has also ignored that because I gave her that information. So there is going to be litigation if this administration changes in November. I am sure that any other administration coming in will reverse this. And I think it would be a great relief to people in the FDA and the DEA who oppose this but cannot speak out against it because they're being controlled by the political appointees. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Next, we have Robert Charles. Bobby, are you there? There you are. It's all yours, Robert. Your mic's not working.
How's that?
Good.
So given the time constraints, I'm going to keep it short. I'll just be the exclamation point here. I want to thank Bryn Spejcher especially. You know, I've been in this business for almost 40 years, and your story is compelling. You're like the survivor on the Titanic warning people that this is out there. And I think you have an incredible future ahead of you, speaking truth to power. And I think that might be your life mission. I also want to thank Roger Morgan, and I want to, of course, I want to thank Every Brain Counts, and I want to thank Dave Evans, who I've known for years. He is, as Roger described, one of the leading experts in the country on what the law really should be, and what the facts are. You know, I will keep this fairly short, and I will try to focus on national security. I worked in the Reagan White House during the era when Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan did turn this crisis around in an earlier moment. I worked for George Herbert Walker Bush after being a litigator for a while and clerking on the Ninth Circuit. And ironically, he gave an Oval Office address in September of 1989, in which he argued, because it was the #1 issue in the Gallup polls at that time, he argued that 5,000 kids dying a year was a national crisis. Imagine that. We lost more than 107,000, which is really underreporting last year. We only saved the lives we did probably out of Narcan and some of the pre-existing treatment programs. We think about this for a moment. We have a memorial not far from where you are. I'm up here in Maine, but spent a lot of time in Washington. We have a memorial there for 58,000 men who died in Vietnam over a decade. We lose 2 Vietnams a year with respect to the kids that we're losing from our population. We lose 3 Korean Wars a year. Every 5 years, we lose as many casualties in young men and women as we lost in all of World War II. So we are in the vortex of a change, a transformation of society that is happening like a tectonic plate shift or something under your feet moving that you're aware is there, but you're not really focused on it. And what I really will get to is that we live in an era of profound untruth. We all know this. And so the question is, where is the truth? And the truth in the group of people that you just heard from is really right there. And frankly, there are an awful lot of people out there that could validate this. We could talk for 3 weeks about the science that validates everything that was just said today. People like Bertha Madras doing primary research up at Harvard Medical School have been after this for years. And what have we done? We have now consigned or reassigned what is truth to public perception. So it gets very dangerous, as David and Roger and others noted, when you take something that is objectively science and you turn it into some kind of a political game where it can be motivated by greed or by vote getting. At the end of the day, medicine, like raw science in any category, is not subject to public perception. It is an absolute in the sense that it's either true or untrue. The sun either rises in the east and sets in the west, or it doesn't. Drugs either work or they don't. And that's why we have the FDA, not a bunch of public, a lot of people trying to promote their own agendas, but rather objective assessors of what is and is not medicine. And we know for a fact that THC, while it has contributed, it has medical effects that could be channeled in the right direction. Getting it out there as medicine when it's really not medicine is profoundly dangerous to the public. And you're absolutely right, everyone who spoke. It's not only the immediate effects and the creation of psychosis, and it's just, this isn't even debatable. Why we're even having to do a press conference. This press conference should be done at the White House. It should be done at the Justice Department. It should be done at HHS. This is not a debatable proposition. THC directly contributes to psychosis in a profound way. And it's happening all over the country today. And we're allowing it to happen, which is incidentally a multifold sort of tsunami, if you will, in terms of the social welfare of the country. We have problems now with military recruiting. We have problems with mental health in a broader sense. We have problems with drug-related crime in these places. In Maine, we have these 300 illegal grow houses, just like in California, just like in Georgia. And I guess that allows me to then turn the page and say, you have to understand this is more than just a greed or political votes or even an ideological battle. This is actually a broad spectrum battle of intergenerational warfare on the global stage. And anybody who's in this field knows, I spent 10 years as an intelligence officer as well as being the Assistant Secretary of State for Colin Powell. I've spent time in 50 countries, and it's crystal clear what's happening here. What's happening here is exactly what has happened in places like Colombia, Bolivia, Peru, Mexico. It is an intrusion intentionally into the truth-seeking and the truth-providing elements of the government. It is a corruption, a public corruption of the society, and the goal, of course, is power acquisition, and that has always been the case. So we have an ongoing. We used to call it in World War II. It was called psyops. It's now information warfare. What we have is an ongoing battle, in particular with places like China, but also with non-state actors that wish only the worst for this country. They resent us. They are jealous of us. They want to disintegrate our inner cohesion. And one of the greatest accelerants, not just in the United States, but globally, in West Africa, you pick your country, anywhere in the world, one of the swiftest accelerants of internal disintegration is the promotion of drugs. And the fastest way to promote a drug is to promote it as if it has no bad side effects, to give it all the positivity that will allow people to initiate. Once they initiate, they're in, and THC is an addictive. Everything that got said here, I mean, go to NIDA, go to CASA, the Columbia Medical School, go to the Harvard Medical School. This is stuff that is crystal clear, and it's being ignored for political and for financial reasons. So I'm going to tell you that having been in those countries, having seen it take them down, we are right on the cusp of that today. We are at an inflection point right now from a national security perspective when the combination of internal ignorance, open borders, allowing this trafficking process to go unabated, people underwriting prosecutors and lawlessness ultimately will either we will turn it back and we will understand the gravity of what we're facing, and we will understand it as a national security issue, and thus we will get around behind it, and we will support the parents that are trying to reverse it, the doctors that are trying to reverse it, the law enforcement community that knows there isn't a county in this country, there isn't a city, a town in this country that is not directly affected by the downflow effects of legalizing marijuana or use of marijuana, and the profound sort of measurable effects of where that leads, including fentanyl deaths. Right where I am right now, in a town of 500 people, I deal with families that are wrestling with fentanyl overdoses and with kids that are addicted. That never would have happened 30 years ago, never. And every one of those kids started with marijuana. So you can say what you like. You can discount it. You can pretend that medicine isn't medicine, and that things that aren't medicine are medicine. But at the end of the day, what you're doing is buying in to a narrative that is exactly the narrative that China wants. It is exactly the narrative that all of the enemies of this country want. And I urge you to look at this, notch it up a bit, and understand that this is not just an issue of personal security or of municipal security or of state security or federal security. This is an issue of national security of a global proportion. And I think people just don't understand the magnitude of it. And we can talk from the rooftops, and I hope we keep doing that. But at some point, people have to understand that the long-term interest of this country involves engaging in the battle, the intergenerational warfare battle, and supporting our kids, not allowing them to fall victim to something that is being pushed aggressively, internally and externally, by the enemies of the United States of America.
Thanks, Bobby. You're the best.
You're welcome.
Everybody should engage in this battle. You know, I had a calling recently telling me to take out George Soros. I said, that's a lofty endeavor. He just gave $25 million to his son Alexander to carry on the battle to destroy this country. I got a little help from a couple of beautiful pastors at my church, so I got a little bit of money to fight with, but we either need a benevolent billionaire on our side, or I've said for 15 years, only the federal government has the resources to solve this problem. And when the federal government is taken over by the enemy, it really calls for a change in our government. And hopefully that will occur. I must say that this is a bipartisan issue. When President Trump was in office, we didn't get a lot of help last time. I think part of that is, like most Americans, he had no idea of the dangers of this drug and what has to be done to solve it. I would say this to all Americans. Here was the edict from, one edict from George Soros. Says the ultimate objective has to be to recapture the Republican Party from the conservative and religious extremists who now control it. Religious extremists meaning Christians, I presume. So I would tell you I'm unapologetically a conservative and a Christian. I'm a father of kids that lost the quality of their life. I have grandkids in Florida from 16 to 22. One is at University of Miami, and I talked to my daughter last week about how bad it is. I said, I've read that 44% of college students 19 to 22 years old are using marijuana. She said, it's much worse than that. She said, now you can buy Delta 8 marijuana that goes up to 30% THC content. You can buy it in a filling station or convenience store. And what they don't know is the human brain isn't fully developed until the late 20s, even maybe later. And when you're using this, it's dose and age related. The more you use and the younger you are, the worse the damage to your brain. And even as little as one joint a month has led to suicidal ideation later, particularly with girls. But you don't have to use a lot of this in order to alter your brain. So the other thing I am is a veteran. And when I look at the devastation that's occurring because of an evil person in our midst that has basically hijacked our government, I think every veteran ought to be livid about what's going on. And we're coming up to Memorial Day where we honor all those who lost their lives or limbs. I'm calling on all veterans and I'm calling on all Americans. One thing we can all agree on, irrespective of party affiliation, is that our kids and our grandkids are important, as is our safety. And what's happening in America today, if this isn't changed almost momentarily, this nation will cease to exist as we've ever known it before. So with that said, I want to thank all of you for participating. You two beautiful gals. Bryn, for your courage. And Cliff and David and Robert, all of you, you did a great job. So when I served in the military, it was 56 to 58. I was only 17 and a half to 19 and a half. I managed to squeeze in between Korea and Vietnam. I claim it wasn't my fault. Nobody started a war because I was ready to kick butt if I had to. But we're at a point now where I think this is the beginning of a war. I'm in it, going to die on this hill, I guess, hopefully later rather than sooner. But let's get together and take our country back. Thank you so much.